Islands are always strange places. Cut off from the mainland, life evolves in bizarre ways. On modern islands you can find giant tortoises, dwarf elephants, or birds that cannot fly. But if you really want to see how weird and dangerous island ecosystems can become, you have to travel back in time. And there is no better example than Madagascar during the Late Cretaceous. Back then, Madagascar was not the lush island we know today. It was already isolated, having broken away from Africa around 160 million years ago and from India about 88 million years ago. By the Late Cretaceous, roughly 70 million years ago, it was an island adrift in the Indian Ocean, separated from the rest of the world by hundreds of kilometers of water. This isolation made it a laboratory of evolution. And what emerged there was nothing short of terrifying. Forget paradise beaches and lemurs. Cretaceous Madagascar was hell on earth. Its skies, rivers, forests, and plains were ruled by predators unlike anywhere else. It was a world where every corner hid something dangerous, from giant reptiles to monstrous amphibians. And in the middle of it all stood one of the strangest and most fearsome dinosaurs ever to live, Majungasaurus. At first glance, Majungasaurus looked like a typical theropod dinosaur. It was bipedal, with muscular legs, a massive skull, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. But look closer and you realize just how odd this creature was. It belonged to a group called the Abelosaurids, distant relatives of Carnotaurus from South America. Abelosaurids were specialized predators with short, blunt skulls, rough-textured bones, and bizarre features like crests and horns. Majungasaurus itself had a dome-shaped horn on its head, almost like a single crown, and skin impressions suggest its body may have been covered with rough, scaly bumps. It was not the largest predator of its age, about 7 meters long, much smaller than a Tyrannosaurus rex. But what it lacked in size, it made up for in brutality. Its teeth were not razor-sharp like a shark's but short, thick, and perfect for gripping and crushing. Scientists believe Majungasaurus was not a quick killer. Instead, it clamped down on prey and held tight, suffocating its victim in a prolonged, horrifying struggle. Once its prey collapsed, it tore the body apart. Imagine a predator that didn't just kill, it strangled life out of its victims. But perhaps the most shocking thing about Majungasaurus was not how it killed, but what it sometimes ate. Fossil evidence shows clear bite marks on bones of other Majungasaurus individuals. These marks match the shape and spacing of its teeth perfectly. In other words, this dinosaur practiced cannibalism. When food was scarce, Majungasaurus turned on its own kind, devouring rivals or even members of its own pack. Few predators in history reveal such ruthless survival tactics. Now imagine being a smaller dinosaur on this island. Herds of titanosaurs, the long-necked sauropods, roamed the land, but in Madagascar they, too, were strange. The main species, Rapadosaurus, was smaller than its mainland cousins, only about 15 meters long. On other continents, sauropods could grow twice that size, but isolation stunted Madagascar's giants. Even so, Rapadosaurus was still a massive creature, weighing several tons. Juveniles, however, were especially vulnerable. Fossilized bones of young titanosaurs show bite marks from predators, likely Majungasaurus, evidence that the king of Madagascar feasted on the young of its island giants. But Majungasaurus was not the only threat. Madagascar teemed with predators of all shapes and sizes. One of the most nightmarish was not even a dinosaur, but a crocodile relative known as Majungasaurus. This beast was about 5 meters long, with armor-plated skin and a mouth full of conical teeth. Unlike modern crocodiles that mostly lurk in rivers, Majungasaurus had limbs and a body suggesting it spent more time on land. Imagine a crocodile that didn't wait at the water's edge but stalked its prey across dry ground. For herbivorous dinosaurs trying to drink at rivers or graze near swamps, there was no safety. And then came the snakes. One of the largest known from Cretaceous Madagascar was Madagascarophis, a constrictor that may have reached several meters in length. These snakes hunted smaller dinosaurs, mammals, and even hatchlings of titanosaurs. Coiling around their victims, they squeezed the life out of them before swallowing them whole. Fossilized snake remains have even been found in nests of sauropods, suggesting that baby dinosaurs sometimes became their meals before they could take their first steps. The island also produced amphibians straight out of nightmares. Among them was Beelzebufo, the so-called devil frog. This monstrous frog grew up to 40 centimeters long, with a wide, gaping mouth and jaws strong enough to crush bones. It likely ambushed prey, lunging forward to swallow anything that fit in its maw. Small reptiles, mammals, and perhaps even juvenile dinosaurs. Imagine a world where a frog could kill you. That was Madagascar in the late Cretaceous. But it wasn't all about giant killers. The island also hosted some of the strangest small creatures of the age. Early mammals, for example, were evolving in unique ways. Fossils show bizarre teeth and jaw shapes not seen anywhere else, hinting at diets and lifestyles we still don't fully understand. One lineage, the Gondwanatheres, had rodent-like incisors and may have filled niches similar to today's rats or rabbits. These mammals lived in the shadows of dinosaurs, but their unusual features show how isolation pushed evolution down unexpected paths. Even the birds of Madagascar were peculiar. Fossils suggest that some of them had teeth, a primitive trait lost in modern species. Others had claws on their wings, blurring the line between bird and dinosaur. These strange avians added yet another layer of danger to the skies, swooping down on small reptiles or insects while avoiding the larger predators below. Taken together, this ecosystem was a perfect storm of danger. From the land-stalking crocodiles to the cannibal dinosaurs, from giant snakes to monstrous frogs, Madagascar was filled with threats at every level. Isolation had not tamed the island. It had turned it into a crucible of horror. And yet, life thrived. Dinosaurs, crocodiles, snakes, frogs, birds, and mammals all carved out niches, competing and surviving in a delicate balance. For millions of years, Madagascar remained a realm of nightmares, proving that islands are not always safe havens. Sometimes, they are prisons of evolution, forging creatures so strange and deadly they seem like the stuff of legend. Subscribe if you liked the video. The deeper you look into Cretaceous Madagascar, the stranger and more dangerous it becomes. This island wasn't just a miniature version of the continents. It was its own experiment in evolution, a place where isolation magnified both brutality and weirdness. Let's return to the dominant predator, Majungasaurus. While on the surface it resembled other theropods, its behavior made it unique. The evidence of cannibalism is especially chilling. Paleontologists have discovered Majungasaurus bones with tooth marks that match no other predator. The spacing and shape of the impressions line up perfectly with its own jaws. This means that when food ran scarce, these dinosaurs devoured one another. Cannibalism isn't unknown in nature. Modern crocodiles, sharks, and even lions have been recorded eating their own kind. But in Majungasaurus, it seems to have been relatively common. For an animal already feared for its brutal hunting style, the thought of it consuming its own kin paints a picture of a truly merciless killer. Its hunting strategy also set it apart. Unlike the slashing teeth of raptors or the bone-crunching jaws of tyrannosaurs, Majungasaurus likely suffocated its prey. Its skull structure suggests it clamped down and held on tight until the victim stopped breathing, similar to how modern big cats kill. This slow, drawn-out method made encounters with Majungasaurus terrifying for any creature unlucky enough to cross its path. Imagine the helpless thrashing of a juvenile sauropod pinned in its grip, life slowly drained away before being torn apart. This predator didn't just kill, it prolonged the suffering of its prey. But Madagascar wasn't ruled by Majungasaurus alone. Other reptiles shared the island, and each brought its own unique brand of horror. Take Majungasaurus, the terrestrial crocodile relative. Unlike modern crocs that lurk in rivers, waiting patiently for unsuspecting victims, Majungasaurus roamed freely on land. Its body was bulky, its limbs powerful, and its jaws strong enough to crush bones. To face one on land was like encountering a crocodile that had learned how to sprint after you. For herbivores, there was no escape. Predators could strike from both water and land. And if Majungasaurus wasn't enough, other croc-like creatures added to the terror. Smaller but more agile species hunted fish and amphibians, filling every ecological gap. These crocodilomorphs showed just how diverse reptiles could become when isolated on an island. Snakes, too, played their part. Fossil evidence suggests that some of Madagascar's snakes were specialized predators of dinosaur hatchlings. Imagine sauropod nests, filled with vulnerable eggs or newborns. As soon as the mother turned away, Serpents slithered in, devouring the next generation of giants before they could even grow. In fact, fossilized snake remains have been found inside sauropod nesting sites, proving that this gruesome scene was more than speculation. And then there was Beelzebufo, the devil frog. This massive amphibian, nearly half a meter long, could open its enormous mouth and swallow prey whole. Modern horned frogs, its closest living relatives, are known to attack animals nearly their own size. Now magnify that by several times. Beelzebufo may have preyed on hatchling dinosaurs, lizards, and even small mammals. For a creature with such a harmless reputation today, the thought of a killer frog lurking in the undergrowth is almost surreal. Even the herbivores of Madagascar weren't safe or ordinary. Take Cretaceous, the island's main sauropod. At 15 meters long, it was still huge by our standards, but tiny compared to its cousins elsewhere. This dwarfing effect is common on islands. Resources are limited, and so animals often shrink over generations to fit their environment. But this shrinking came at a price: vulnerability. Juvenile Cretaceous were small enough to be hunted not only by Majungasaurus but also by crocodiles, snakes, and even frogs. In Madagascar, being born was almost a death sentence. Mammals, though small, were also remarkable here. Gondwanatheres, strange creatures with rodent-like incisors, lived alongside multituberculates, insectivores, and other primitive mammals. They survived by staying hidden, burrowing underground, and coming out at night. Unlike dinosaurs, which dominated the open landscapes, these mammals thrived in the margins, digging, gnawing, and scraping out a living. Their unusual teeth suggest diets that ranged from tough roots to insects, showing how flexible they had to be to endure such a hostile environment. The birds of Madagascar were equally strange. Some still carried teeth in their beaks, a primitive feature long gone in modern birds. Others had claws on their wings, reminders of their dinosaur ancestry. These birds likely hunted insects or small vertebrates, darting between trees and swamps while dodging predators that could end their lives in seconds. All these creatures lived in ecosystems shaped by isolation. Cut off from the rest of the world for tens of millions of years, evolution pushed Madagascar's species down unique paths. Dinosaurs shrank, predators grew more brutal, amphibians became giants, and mammals experimented with odd new forms. This isolation created a balance: precarious, violent, and bizarre. And yet, despite the danger, life thrived. Predators hunted, prey reproduced, and ecosystems cycled through endless battles of survival. For millions of years, Madagascar was a closed world of nightmares, its creatures unknown to the rest of the planet. But no ecosystem, no matter how strange or fierce, lasts forever. At the end of the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago, catastrophe struck. A massive asteroid slammed into what is now Mexico, unleashing firestorms, tsunamis, and a global darkness that smothered ecosystems. The age of dinosaurs ended in a geological blink. For Madagascar, this extinction was devastating. The island's giants, Cretaceous and Majungasaurus, vanished. The crocodile relatives and giant snakes were wiped out. Even the monstrous Beelzebufo disappeared. Entire evolutionary experiments, forged in isolation, ended overnight. Only the small, the adaptable, and the lucky survived. And among those survivors were mammals, tiny and fragile, hiding in burrows and feeding on insects and seeds. They endured the cataclysm, inheriting a world where the great predators had fallen. From those survivors would eventually rise primates, and millions of years later, humans. Madagascar's Cretaceous hell was erased, but its legacy remained. It showed how isolation could create worlds within worlds, ecosystems so strange they seemed like nightmares made flesh. When the asteroid struck at the end of the Cretaceous, it silenced the nightmare world of Madagascar. Fire, darkness, and global cold ended the reign of Majungasaurus, the herds of Cretaceous, the bone-crushing crocodiles, and the devil frog Beelzebufo. The island's evolutionary experiment was reset, leaving only fragments of its bizarre life behind. But the story of Cretaceous Madagascar does not end with extinction. It lives on in what came after, and in the lessons it left for us. To understand the legacy, you need to remember what made this island so unique in the first place. Isolation. Madagascar had already been cut off from Africa and India for tens of millions of years before the extinction. That isolation had produced its miniature sauropods, cannibal dinosaurs, land-stalking crocodiles, and monstrous amphibians. Each of these was an evolutionary solution shaped not by global trends, but by the limits of island life. Resources were scarce, predators and prey had nowhere to run, and competition forced species into strange and extreme adaptations. This is the same force that later created Madagascar's modern marvels, its lemurs, its giant chameleons, its baobab forests. The island has always been a crucible where life is pushed to extremes. But in the late Cretaceous, those extremes made it one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Imagine stepping into that world. The air is hot and heavy, filled with the cries of strange birds with teeth in their beaks. Across the plains, herds of Rapatosaurus move slowly, their long necks sweeping over low shrubs. Juveniles huddle near the adults, but danger is never far. From the shadows, a Majungasaurus stalks, its crown-like horn catching the light, its jaws ready to clamp down on a helpless calf. Nearby, the ground trembles as Majungasaurus, the land-walking crocodile, emerges from the undergrowth, jaws snapping. And from the underbrush, a sudden leap, the devil frog Beelzebufo, crushing some unfortunate hatchling in its massive mouth. Above, winged predators swoop, while snakes coil silently in nests. This was not a paradise. It was hell. And yet, it was balanced. Each predator had its place. Each prey had its defenses. Life, as always, found a way. For millions of years, this island ecosystem thrived in its brutality. It was proof that even the harshest conditions can sustain life, as long as equilibrium is maintained. The asteroid shattered that balance. When sunlight vanished under clouds of dust and ash, plants withered. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, predators fell. The intricate web unraveled in months, perhaps even weeks. For Madagascar, as for the rest of the world, it was the end of an age. But the survivors, the mammals, birds, and smaller reptiles, would inherit a world of opportunity. With the great monsters gone, the stage was set for new lineages. On Madagascar, this eventually meant lemurs, the primates that still define the island today. While they are gentle compared to Majungasaurus, their existence is a direct reminder of the resilience of life after disaster. Looking back, Cretaceous Madagascar offers us more than a story of monsters. It is a window into how evolution works under pressure. Cut off from the rest of the world, species adapted in ways that seem almost impossible. A cannibal dinosaur, a frog that ate dinosaurs, a crocodile that stalked on land. These creatures remind us that life's creativity knows no limits. They also remind us of fragility. No matter how terrifying, no matter how well adapted, every species was swept away in the cataclysm. Majungasaurus, with all its brutality, vanished. Rapatosaurus, despite its size, fell. Even Beelzebufo, ruler of the swamps, disappeared. The only survivors were those small and flexible enough to endure scarcity and change. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson. Survival does not always belong to the biggest, strongest, or most fearsome. It belongs to the adaptable, the cooperative, the resilient. Madagascar in the Cretaceous shows us both sides of the coin: the incredible power of isolation to forge monsters, and the inevitability of change that even monsters cannot resist. Today, the island still carries whispers of that ancient past. Fossils of Majungasaurus lie buried in its rocks. Teeth of crocodiles and snakes remind us of the terrors that once stalked its swamps. And every lemur leaping through a tree is proof of life's ability to endure, to adapt, and to reclaim even the harshest landscapes. Hell on Earth existed once, on a lonely island in the Cretaceous. But from that hell, and from the ashes of extinction, came the seeds of the world we know today. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video.